Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar about streamlining anti-money laundering with real-time analytics. I am joined here today with Pat Bates, our solutions architect, and Adrian Estala, the VP of Data Mesh Consulting Services. A few housekeeping items. Please make sure that if you have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, to put all of your questions into the questions tab on your GoToWebinar control panel. We will save all the questions for the end, so throw them in there as you have them throughout the presentation, and then we'll answer everything when we are finished presenting. I'm now going to hand it over to Pat to go over the agenda for the day.
So what we'd like to talk about today is basically want to cover this in two parts. For part one, what I want to cover is a particular customer's anti-money laundering journey. And so we'll talk about a particular client that I've worked with. We'll look at this from the business perspective. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What are the challenges they were facing, risk and issues they were trying to avoid? And what's the Starburst solution that helps them to solve those challenges for anti-money laundering? And then we'll look at it from kind of a long range perspective of how we start with a very tactical pain point solution, but we could extend that to a more strategic data mesh. And that's going to bring us into part two of this conversation. I'll hand off to my colleague, Adrian, who will then kind of take it from there and lead us into a discussion about data mesh. What are the fundamentals of data mesh? What's a typical data mesh journey, both with respect to this customer, this client, and their AML, but just generally speaking, what's this journey look like? We'll bring it all back home to how can we deploy a very effective AML data mesh strategy for your organization. So to start things off a little bit, as we get into this data mesh conversation, it's helpful for Adrian and myself to know what's your familiarity with data mesh today. And so I'm going to launch a little bit of a poll here. And if everyone wouldn't mind over the next 60 seconds, just answer this question. Can you see the questions? I didn't launch yet. Sorry, my fault. There. So basically, if you could select the sentence that best describes your own personal knowledge and familiarity with data mesh, not so much your organization per se, because we're talking to you. And so where do you sit with data mesh? And Adrian will make sure that we bring everybody on this webinar kind of to a similar level of understanding as he gets into this part of the conversation. And so we'll let this run for a few seconds. We'll give it another 30 seconds. I can see some percentages. I'm not sure the number. Oh, here we go. About half of you have voted so far. So we'll go another 10, 20 seconds. Think about it.
No surprises. I think this is where a lot of our customers are. So I think it's a pretty accurate response.
Yeah, there's no wrong answer. All right, so that's about a minute. Let's take a look at that because I don't think the percentages will change much. And so right, it's a curve. It's a line. You know, two-thirds of you are still learning. You're a beginner. That's good. I think we're all still beginners at some level. And then about a third of you have a pretty good understanding of the concepts, but you're just beginning your journey. And again, like Adrian pointed out, this is a pretty typical ratio that we see. And so we will come back to that as we proceed forward. And with that, I will go on to part one, one particular anti-money laundering journey with Starburst. And so let's start by just looking at the business perspective. So first is the landscape. So within banking, within this bank, within every bank, every financial institution, there's thousands of financial products and services, and there's new ones coming all the time that then participate in billions of transactions per day. I think we know this, but what it is each one of these financial products and services presents an opportunity to money laundering. So the money laundering, they want to be able to integrate the money into the bank and then do a bunch of layered operations where they blend it with real money. They do, you know, small transactions or sequences of transactions, or take advantage of new and different products, cryptocurrencies, different foreign exchanges, et cetera, that creates these thousands of unique pathways for money laundering. And so new techniques are attempted and exploited all the time. So the challenge for the banks is how do we prevent, how do we detect that it's even happening? How do we prevent it from happening in the first place? And if it does happen, how do we catch those who've been doing it? Those are the challenges. And all of this operates under an umbrella of heavy regulatory requirements. And if we look globally at the risk and the cost, I have some statistic I'll share with you here in a second. But basically, there's billions of fraudulent transactions per year that's worth billions in fraud. Right? It's just a big problem, and it's a big expense, and it represents a big loss to the banks and financial institutions that leads to billions of regulatory fines and criminal fines as well, potentially, not just for the actors, but for those who fail. And there's threats to national security. The global economy is impacted. Reputational damages to the bank, to the institutions, to the country. Right, and so if we look at this from a global perspective, in 2020, between $800 billion US and $2 trillion was laundered globally. About 2 to 5% of the global gross domestic product (GDP). So it's a huge amount of resources and money that's involved. And the detection around the world basically catches around 31% of laundered money. So that means a good 69% of money laundering activity goes unprevented, undetected, unprosecuted. They get away with it. Even so, that leads to that 31% has led to, in 2020, fines totaling between about $4.67 billion US. And that's up from $3.75 billion in 2019. So the moral of the story is this is an increasing problem. It's not getting better, it's getting worse, it's getting harder. And as our technology and products landscape evolves and matures and grows, the opportunities grow along with it. And so if we then go back and let's look at the challenges at our particular bank client. And we start with looking at their anti-money laundering monitoring investigations. And so on the right side, you can see the core activities of anti-money laundering involve it more or less in order, although it's really kind of a cycle. First, know your customer. How do we authenticate who our customers are, and what do we know about them? We need to be able to assess the risk that this customer has or presents to us with respect to their propensity to launder money, or the likelihood that they might be involved in money laundering. And then based on that risk assessment, we then apply particular rules. We might put them in a particular class of activities so that we pay different attention to their transactions, say relative to other folks who are in a low risk category. And that leads into the monitoring. Monitoring is essentially detection. Has money laundering occurred? We look for sequences of events. Did they do a bunch of small transactions, a bunch of small deposits? Certain instruments were traded or bought, sold, international. Money was moved from one bank to another. All these different things raise red flags within the monitoring scenarios and monitoring models. And so there's a lot of analytic models, statistical models, machine learning algorithms that are used for detection as well as then prevention. The smarter we get, then we can catch the stuff as it's even occurring and maybe prevent it from happening in the first place. But if we have it and we detect it, then it goes into this third box, which is investigations. Investigators need to be able to access the data they need and drill back in time and look at very detailed information so that they can piece together what's happened, determine whether it was actual fraud, actual money laundering happening. In order to do all these things on the right, we need data. Our customer needs data from various data feeds, all the financial products they have, all information around all the customers and the markets, and of course the transactions themselves, all the regulatory rules, company policies and procedures and so on. All these data feeds have to be processed in order to satisfy the needs of the anti-money laundering use cases. So what this bank has done, and what so many banks have done, and other organizations have some kind of an enterprise data platform. In this case, it happens to be on Hadoop. It could be some kind of other distributed object storage, S3, and so on. It could be in other kinds of databases as well. But this is not an uncommon structure for an enterprise data platform. So the bank brings data from these various data feeds and puts them into a layer of this platform where there's basically just raw source. We have to land the data before we can do anything with it. We do some integration, some ETL processes. We build out various dimensional models that are more suitable for analytics and for machine learning algorithms and BI and so on. But because of performance constraints within this Hadoop environment, the number one challenge for this bank was performance. We run queries using Hadoop infrastructure like Hive or Spark, and we're just not able to get results fast enough to satisfy the needs of our activities and our use cases, particularly around monitoring first. And so a lot of optimized analytic objects then get created as yet another layer. And so all of these objects get created specific to particular types of queries, particular models. As we change the models, these objects have to be either new objects introduced or changed, modified. So it's a lot of activity goes on creating these optimized analytic objects just so the process of monitoring can happen at all. And it's still not fast enough. They're still running into performance problems that's leading to potential risk and failures. And so major challenges for monitoring investigations, just raw performance. It's too slow, takes too long to get a response to a query, so it impedes our ability to do rapid prevention and detection and to take action when we do identify potential money laundering. And then so in order to address the performance, we build all these optimization objects. Now we have proliferation of data copies. So every copy of the data then carries its own risk, its own cost. How did I create it? Where does it live? There's got to be space for it. The risk with protecting the data, potential breach, we've got to lock it down, who's got access, and the amount of time that it takes to create it. Every time we make a data copy, huge cost, huge delay. This leads to the need for investigations need to drill through these optimization objects and get into the raw data, get into the dimensional models. It's difficult to do that when the query performance is so limiting. And so that impedes the investigations. The complexity of regulatory compliance, our ability to change the models as needed, as rules change, as financial instruments change, as new data objects change, and we learn more about what bad actors are doing to get around what we've done previously. That's across hundreds of jurisdictions, and that leads into even the data sovereignty challenges. There's 100+ countries involved in this solution. Everybody's got their own laws, regulations, rules about who can access data, where that data can move to, can it move out of country, not go to the cloud, not. It's a very complex and challenging environment. One of the most. So the impacts of all this is predictable. Delayed detection. We don't see it when it happens. It takes too long to see it after it happened. We can't. It delays our ability to deploy new models and to do better prevention and to do better detection. And so that leads then into investigations take longer. It's hard to drill through. I got to pull data out, massage it, get it ready. Now I can do my investigation. It's taking too long. We lose this closing window of opportunity from when the money laundering happens to the time when we are more likely to be able to take effective action is not very long. So we need to make a whole bunch of copies of data with all that cost. The bottom line, it's all risk. It's the risk of loss, financial loss, and fines for compliance, regulatory compliance, and or all these issues we deal with when we have copies of data that have to be regulated and maintained. Lots of loss, lots of fines, very high risk. So what does Starburst do? So Starburst was able to come in with our unique capability to give this customer a single point of data access that allows them to access the data where it lives at scale with high performance in this Hadoop environment in particular. So we start with stage one, performance. We're running queries against the optimized analytic objects, takes too long. So Starburst is able to parallelize the compute across our scalable architecture and parallelize the access to the data within those objects so that we can do more rapid query response time. So now detection queries and models, these query results come back in seconds instead of minutes, or minutes instead of hours. Queries that couldn't complete before are now completing. So we rapidly accelerate the entire process for monitoring. There's fewer data copies are required. We don't need optimization objects. Starburst is very fast. We can just go right after the data. So this allows for more rapid deployment of new models, changes to models, new queries, ad hoc queries. That leads to more timely detection, a better prevention, and that is a reduction in loss and the risk of fines. And so as we move forward with a solution, not just accessing the optimized analytics objects, but let's move left. Let's allow access using Starburst's unique federation capability. Now we can talk to any data wherever it lives, join it in real time to other data sources so that we can do effective investigations. Now we can drill through into more details. We can go back to the raw source. We might be able to go back to the raw data feeds as needed. And so we can get to that detailed data we need for more effective investigations and frankly for more effective monitoring. No more data copies, very few, little need for any data copies as we move forward. That's going to give us more timely and accurate resolutions of our investigations so that we can take action when something has actually occurred or is suspected to have occurred. We can get a resolution quickly. It's going to reduce the loss, reduce the risk, reduce the fines. So it's an excellent solution for this bank, and we're rolling into production now, and we're continuing to evolve it to address more of the use cases of anti-money laundering. And we have written up this use case in a nice white paper that's just available now. There's a link here. We'll email participants on this webinar. You'll have access to it. You can find it on our website that describes in more detail of what I've been presenting on you this morning. And so what this means for this bank is that we have the opportunity to move forward into a more full-featured anti-money laundering solution. We can now access all of the data so that we can participate and make more effective and more efficient implementations of Know Your Customer and assessing the risk, those models that do the risk assessment, the monitoring, the detection, the prevention, and the effective, timely investigations. But we can go then further still. And if you look at the journey, this is like basically with every organization, there's an on-ramp to data mesh. And so we start with something very tactical. It's just a tactical problem, and it's a big problem. I can't get access to the data I need in a timely fashion. So we address, number one, that immediate obstacle. So we've done that with this bank with their anti-money laundering solution that enhances their monitoring and their investigations. And then as we extend that capability to drill through the data across the pipeline, we basically create a data fabric solution. Now analysts and users have this democratized access to all the data assets wherever they live. They don't require building particular objects. And then that leads us into another stage of the evolution that's more strategic into data mesh. And with that, I will hand off to my colleague, Adrian, who will then take it over. And I'm going to continue to drive, so he's going to tell me when to change slides.
Let's practice that. If I'm gonna say go or I'm gonna say back, and let's see if it works. I'm just kidding, Pat. Hey, that was awesome. I learned a lot on AML from listening to that, Pat. I really appreciate that start. I think as you led in the last slide, we'll start if you can move the next one. The next kind of strategic step is to kind of move into a data mesh. Now, judging by where we were with the initial poll, I think roughly 67 or 70% of you may have said we're just kind of getting started. And so let's start with this slide, right? This is kind of the Adrian three-step dance to data mesh, if you will, or the 3 steps understanding data mesh. I think there's a lot to kind of jump into. If you read the book, we recommend you pick up Jamak's book. You can get one for free from our website, or you can go get one, so to speak, at your local bookstore maybe. But if you read the book, there's a lot of detail and a lot to understand, and certainly go do that. But before you do that, I think it's really important to first start with just a foundational understanding of the basics, right? The story that Pat told just now is really focused on step 1 of data mesh, right? It's about connectivity. The principle for data mesh is leave your data where it is, we will connect to it. That's the mesh, right? It's not migrate it somewhere, it's not copy it somewhere, it's not move it somewhere, it's leave it where it is and we can use it, right? And so connectivity is the first step in any data mesh exercise. We've done that. Now, to be clear, that's not, that's where a lot of companies are, but that's not the kind of the full vision of data mesh, right? I think for probably 70 to 80% of our customers, that's where we're currently sitting. Now, as we start to really embrace and start to really move forward with data mesh, the next step is then going to be to create a logical structure, right? So it's not about saying, here's a whole bunch of data, go for it. Rather, it's to start to think about how can I organize this data in a logical structure that makes sense for the consumer. And that second part is the most important piece of data mesh. We're organizing data for the consumer, right? And so that's a huge evolution, so to speak, in the way that we used to work. Architects, central ETL teams working with data, organizing data so that we can run it, manage it better on the architecture side. Data mesh is, hey, let's create autonomous domain teams. Let's get them working with data in the way that they want to use it, in the way that they want to access it. And so that domain structure is the second key principle of a data mesh, and that's the second step that most companies take. Once you have domains, then you're ready to kind of take that big step. The next big step is then starting to build data products. I've got all my data, I leave it where it is, I start to organize that data into domains that my consumers understand, and now I'm creating individual data products that I can share, that I can reuse, and that are interoperable, right? And so reusing doesn't mean just different people using it, but reusing also means that I'm using it for different solutions, whether it's a BI tool or an algorithm or some automation engine, right? So that's the vision we have for our data mesh. Step 1, connect. Step 2, build a domain. Step 3, start to kind of create data products. So if you're with me so far, let's take it a step further, because suspect there are, let's go to the next slide, Pat. You guys want a logical view of what these domains and products look like. And so Starburst, we sit in the center of this. We will connect to your domains. Our magic sauce is Trino, right? We use Trino to connect to all these sources, create federated queries. We, in Starburst, create domains. We can start, you can configure a logical domain in the system. We're not moving data. We're not copying data to some place to analyze it. We're leaving the data where it is, but we're giving you a logical domain, if you will, configuring a logical domain so that when you go to that domain, you know what data to expect. Your finance domain is your finance data. Your real estate domain is your real estate data. You can probably start to imagine from an AML perspective what types of domains you might create for AML. In each of those domains, as I mentioned previously, we create these smart data products. And to be very clear about what a data product is, it's not just an aggregated data set. Sure, it starts out by saying there's a table from that system and a table from this system and a row from this system. That's where you start. But actually the most valuable piece about a data product is the metadata. It's a description for what it is. It's an identification for who else is using it. It's a view for how you created it. It's a list of where the data came from. All that information is extremely valuable. So from an AML team perspective, I want to know where my data comes from. I want to trust my data. I want to make sure that I'm using it in the correct way. And if I'm not sure about it, I would love to know who else is using it so that we can collaborate. All that information is what really makes a data product rich. That metadata, that kind of full view of the data product, not just the data itself, but everything you need to know so that you can use it yourself. Again, in order to use data products, you need to have some kind of a catalog, some type of a hub, if you will, where you can go in and say, hey, I'm looking for a data product that includes X, right? Maybe it's mortgage information. Maybe it's some specific AML investigation piece you're looking for. Maybe you're trying to identify a specific element. And so you can search across data products, pick out the ones that have the information you have. You can then click on the individual data products and look at what's in them, right? In our product, we take it a step further. When you open up a data product, you'll only see the data that you're allowed to see. And so there's a data set in there or a table or a specific field that you don't have permissions for. It's hidden. Fantastic, right? But you still have all the ability, all the value, so to speak, and trying to understand what it is, because if it is data that you need, you can then request permission through your normal process to make sure that you have access to the data so that you can use the product. So it enables a discovery, and that self-service piece, when I talk about people using products, I'm not talking necessarily about IT people, I'm also talking about business teams, I'm talking about analytics team, I'm talking about your AML teams having the ability to go in there and do their own discovery. That's really the magic. It's when you're able to enable these teams to start to do more on their own. Awesome. Let's go to the next one, Pat. So from an AML perspective, and let me just highlight some of the things that you've already gone through, Pat. Let's start with the left side. If I'm an architect, if I'm an IT, I don't want to be a bottleneck, right? I'm tired of having teams come in and say, you're taking too long, right? It's another IT project. It's another IT team. The idea that I can start to create self-service, that I can enable my consumers to do more themselves, it frees me up to do more, right? It frees my data scientists to do more of the harder algorithmic work. Maybe they're doing machine learning. I'm enabling my other teams to do the Power BI stuff or the Tableau stuff. Fantastic, right? Lower cost of ownership, because I'm not having to migrate, because I'm not having to pull up new IT projects to integrate data, because I'm able to leverage my existing sources. And also I know that whatever source comes next, I can just connect to it. That's a sustainable, lower long time TCO, right? So TCO end-to-end drops. And again, no migration required. That's an incredible advantage for the business from a disruption perspective. In my old world, as a CDO, I had so many lakes, I had 36 lakes. And every time I needed to merge something or connect something or move something, there was business disruption. That's the last thing you want to tell a business. Hey, it's going to cost a lot of money. Oh, and by the way, there's going to be some disruption. We're going to have to rewire some of your current applications. And so the idea of not having to move or copy or migrate data is a big one. It's a really valuable one. Now, on the right side of the page, if I think about the business outcomes, if I think about the business value from an AML perspective, it's about effective monitoring, right? I'm able to monitor more because I have greater access to more data. There's data, sometimes we call it dark data, that we don't even know it's there. Nobody's using it. I want to discover that data. A data mesh allows me access to more data sets. I can accelerate my investigations. I've got the data, I've identified there might be an issue, my monitoring has indicated something. Is it a false positive? Is it something real? Do I build a report? Let's do an investigation, right? So in my investigation, I have the ability to dig deeper. I can say, hold on a second, let me use this data product, let me map this data product, let me pick up this data product, let me figure out if what I'm seeing is real. Wait a minute, the data product that I'm looking for doesn't exist. Let me build a data product, right? I think that's when people get really impressed. When they're able to reuse what's already there, that's fantastic. When they're able to build something new because they've discovered it, it's amazing, right? And in Starburst, we make that really easy in our tool because we're just talking about creating a new federated query. You're not having to move data, you're just going to query data where it sits. On the business side, let us not forget, especially if we're dealing with a high compliance environment, this accessible and trusted data is really important. One of my biggest complaints in my old world was I can't find my data and I can't access it. A data mesh creates highly accessible data. I can make the data available. Hold on a second, it's not easily available. It's not open to everybody. It's highly accessible to those that need it. And it's also secure. So from a compliance perspective or a risk perspective or a legal perspective, within a data mesh, you can demonstrate a highly controlled framework to say only these people in this domain and only the people with this access can use the data products. Yes, we can share, but even when we're sharing a data product, we're very careful about what's being shared. Only the data in that product is being shared. Contrast that against where many of us are today. If we're trying to share data, we're talking about sharing lakes. If we're trying to share data, we're not sure how to carve up the pieces to share. It takes a long time. To share a product, it's finite, it's clear, and you can actually define exactly what they can and cannot see. So it's a better approach for governance as well. Awesome, let's go to the next slide, Pat. There are a number of financial services use cases, and I don't want to go through every one of these. I think for those of you in the call, you can probably recognize a lot of these, and you'll probably say there's a lot of overlap, right? So there's somebody might say Customer 360 solves everything. Somebody might say, hi, this new financial digital twin model solves everything. And so there's a lot of overlap between each of these financial service use cases. But what I want you to focus on is the right side of the page. It's not the use case itself, right? So these are things you're already doing, right? So it isn't the data mesh all of a sudden invented the use case. It's that the data mesh will help you accelerate what you're trying to do. And there's a couple of specific reasons why that is, right? First and foremost, I mentioned this earlier, low disruption. For anything that we're trying to do on the IT side, right? A big innovation, a big transformation, a big migration, remember that cloud migration? It's disruptive to the business. A data mesh is not disruptive because you're using the data where it is. So low disruption, bonus points with your business teams. Fast delivery speed. We argue a lot about that sub-second analytics, right? I want that query in 2.3 seconds. No problem, it's gonna take me 18 months to build the solution. 18 months, 2.3 seconds. No, you know, what you really want from the business perspective is you want that project delivered quickly, and you can implement a data mesh fairly quickly in every one of these environments, again, because you're leveraging what's already there. You're focused more on the people and process than you are on the actual technology. Manage scope. A data mesh isn't something you have to implement for everyone all at once. So you're not managing this huge scope for the enterprise. In a data mesh, you can take any one of these use cases and you can implement them in an iterative fashion. I'm going to start a customer 360 model, but I'm going to start with this team. I'm going to start supporting payment services with analytics, but I'm going to start with this group. You can start small and you can grow where the value is. And lastly, rapid adoption. Because the data mesh is about the consumer, because the data mesh is designed for that consumer, it's easier for that consumer to actually adopt. It's easier for that consumer to get started. And so there's a number of benefits, number of characteristics within the data mesh that I think make it very attractive to the business teams because they can accelerate each of these financial services use cases. Great, let's go to the next slide. So we'll close up here in a second and then we'll see if there are any questions. But let's look at the 3 phases for data mesh transformation. And Pat, I like the way you kind of lined that up earlier. You went from tactical to strategic, can't even say the word. Your second step there was data fabric, right? And I like that as well because I think if you saw on my first slide, right, we talk about connectivity. data fabric and data mesh have that first step in common. It's about connectivity. Whether you're building a data mesh or whether you've already built a data fabric, that first step was always to connect what's already there. And so there's a lot of commonality there. Where the data mesh takes a step forward is then to take that connectivity and organize it for the consumer, to take those organized domains and create data products that can be reused and shared. But that doesn't happen overnight. When we think about what a data mesh transformation looks like for an organization, this is a kind of standard approach, right? I like to start, I call it a 90-day pathfinder, right? It's a production showcase. It's not a use case, not a proof of concept that you file away in a closet. You build a domain for maybe an AML team. You build a domain for a specific purpose. You build a couple of data products, maybe 5 or 6 data products for a specific set of consumers, and you get them working and you learn. You think about the integrated processes you have to work with, whether they're data governance processes, whether they're business processes, whether they're compliance or governance processes. You learn how to integrate your mesh with everything else in this Pathfinder. You train a set of consumers. Hey, you're going to be a consumer of data products. Fantastic. The good news is you're going to have access to more data than you ever had. The good news is you're going to be able to build and create your own data products. But that there comes some responsibility as well. And so in a Pathfinder, you also want to start to train, you want to create ambassadors and say, as a data product consumer, let me make sure that you're clear on how to protect the data. Let me make sure you're clear on how to share the data. Let me help you understand how to best use the data. So data literacy is a big part of that Pathfinder. And there's a lot more to talk about on the 90-day Pathfinder. If you're just started, and I look going back to the poll, I think a lot of people as well. I think the second, we had a lot of people that were new, and then we had the second row where people were just getting started. If you are just getting started, just reach out to us. Be happy to walk you through what that Pathfinder looks like so that you can kind of jumpstart your own data mesh journey. Once you're done with the Pathfinder, what you want to then do is you want to start to deploy. It's about refinement, it's about learning, it's about iteration, it's about optimizing. One of the things that I kind of skipped through quickly on the previous slide is optimization. What I really like about a data mesh, when you think about cost optimization, is that you can design each domain individually, right? So I may have an AML domain, and I need high CPU usage. I'm going to design a cost model that works really well for them. I may have a different domain that has a different type of analytics need, that has a different type of consumer, and I can optimize their cost specifically. So I'm not paying a lot of money across the board. Rather, I'm managing cost where my performance is necessary, so to speak. And I can bring my cost down, I can bring my performance down as well in other areas where it's not as critical. And so those levers, if you will, to manage cost and performance are really important. And when you start to deploy other domains, you should think about it that way, right? You should think about creating these autonomous domains that work on their own, that are in every sense designed specifically for that consumer. But as you start to create more domains and more data products, and as you start to work with more consumers, integration becomes more and more important. Integration, not just from the position of being able to share products across domains, but as I mentioned before, integration with process, integration with other tools. The data mesh is an ecosystem, right? Starburst is a part of the data mesh. If you have a catalog tool, your catalog tool across the top is a part of the data mesh. If you have master data management tools or data quality tools, those tools are also a part of the data mesh. And so as you start to grow and evolve your data mesh, that ecosystem becomes more important. The integration of all those tools working together to drive better data for the consumers, ultimately we're all after, but it takes time. That transformation exercise could take years for you to actually achieve, but know that as you're moving forward, you're focused on the areas that create the greatest value for you today. You can move slow, you can move fast. It depends on ultimately what your outcomes are and when those need to be delivered. Fantastic. I think we've got about 20 minutes still, Pat, for some questions. Let me just pause, see if we've got any, Rebecca, if we have any questions in the room.
Yes, so we have a couple, and I just wanted to say a quick reminder for anyone who has any questions to put it in the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. It's located towards the bottom of your panel, but we do have a couple questions. How long does it take to deliver a data mesh solution?
Ooh, yeah, great question. There's no answer to that one, really. It depends. I think what I would say the best answer to that is get started, right? I think when you get started in this Pathfinder is the best way to kind of think about how to get started, right? Whether it's a 90-day or 120 Pathfinder, you want to time box that first exercise. I love 90 days. It fits in a quarter. It fits in a nice investment model, and you take a lot of learning. So to get started, I would say it takes 90 days. To complete it, I don't know, right? It depends on ultimately what your organizations are trying to achieve. And if you think ultimately about the ongoing refinement of data products, if you think about the ongoing refinement of domains, somebody would say it never ends. It just becomes a way of working. It's not a data mesh operations model, it's a digital operations model. Because when you're done implementing technology, then you begin to work on process, and you begin to work on people, and you begin to work on culture. So the data mesh is simply one activity as part of your broader digital transformation journey that's going to take years for a lot of companies. It doesn't mean it takes years for you to create value, right? You can create value in 90 days. You can create additional value in 120 days. You can continue to grow value one domain at a time, but that journey certainly is going to take a bit for any organization, any large organization certainly to achieve.
Great, thank you for that. Next question is, what is the difference between data fabric and data mesh?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I wrote a blog about this a couple weeks ago. I think the marketing hype that's trying to position these two against each other, I think it's confusing, and I think it's unfortunate. For those of us that have implemented data fabric, kind of in the past, I think we did that because we were just really focused on trying to connect data sources, right? And technology aside, right, whether you're talking data virtualization, put the technology aside for a second. If you just think about the concept of what a data fabric is trying to achieve, you're connecting a number of different data sources, and you're trying to use an AI engine and knowledge graphs, right? And so you've got somebody building knowledge graphs, and then you have an AI engine using those knowledge graphs to try to recommend how to use the data. It's a fantastic approach. The challenges a lot of us had with data fabric were it's only as good as your metadata. And so if you don't have good metadata, you don't have good knowledge graphs, then you're unable to actually drive the AI engine, right? So data fabric is about connectivity first and foremost. How you do it is really focused on AI engines in a very, very simple sense. Data mesh is also, in this first step, as I said earlier, is also focused on connectivity. And so somebody would say data mesh and data fabric, step one, are exactly the same. How they do it might be different, but they're both focused on decentralized data sources. Leave your data where it is. They're both focused on trying to find better ways to access and curate all these different data sets together so that you don't have to migrate it. You can leverage it and use it where it is, so to speak. And so in that sense, they're very much the same. To answer your question, the difference is the next step. The difference is data mesh says, hey, I'm going to build domains. Data mesh says, hey, I'm going to create data products. Data mesh says, hey, I'm going to focus on the people and process elements of the organization to make sure that I'm laser focused on consumption, to make sure that I'm laser focused on adoption. That's the primary difference in a mesh, but the two fit very, very well together.
Yeah, and I'll augment a little bit too, because I get the same question from clients, and one of the ways that I think about this is the data fabric is the technology, it's the mechanics of accessing the data. To his point a second ago about when we start thinking about what's the value of these domains and data products, well think about if I have a Starburst solution and I'm talking to 100 data sources, I've got 100 different data sources connected, or 50 or whatever. And I log in and I look at my list of data sources, and it's huge. How do I find anything? How do I leverage it? How do I leverage it and make use out of it, and find the data sets that I need? And so what data mesh does is it creates this metadata around the fabric, so that now we have concepts of domains. Well, I'm only going to look for stuff that's in the domain that I'm interested in. All of a sudden, now I'm way narrowed down my search. But I've also already grouped things within those domains so that I can get laser focus on the subset of data sets and physical connections to that data that's required for my use case. And then I've got all this metadata about it. Is what does this data mean? Who owns it? How do I get access to it? How old is it? You got some examples. I mean, all manner of metadata around that information. So it just makes the physical connection to the data, it just makes it so consumable and useful. So it's going to accelerate those teams over here on the right side of the chart that are able to get the data they need when they need it and just get going with their job. So
yeah.
Great, thank you. Kind of along the same lines, what are the additional benefits of using a data mesh versus a data fabric?
I don't think they're, I mean, so for the first step, they're the same, right? I'm going to build a data fabric. You call it whatever you want to call it. We have customers that call us data fabric. No argument, right? Fantastic. All I care about is that you love the product and that it's working for you, right? So I think in that first step, they're the same benefit, so to speak, same approach. The bigger benefit is when you're ready, and I like your slide, Pat, when you talked about tactical to strategic. When you're ready to start to organize data for the consumer, that's where you start to see the other benefits, right? I'm a consumer. I recognize that in the mesh, it's organized for me. There's benefit for me. It's designed for me. It's easy for me. I trust the framework. I'm a consumer. I may never even know what a fabric is, right? I may never even appreciate the fabric because that's so back office. It probably gives me some benefits, but I don't feel them necessarily, right? Somebody made data easier to access. Awesome, love it. But the fabric isn't really designed for me, right? And there's still benefit to a fabric, make no mistake. But I think that the bigger benefit for the mesh is when you start to say, hey, consumer, this is for you. That's the benefit, right? So it's about putting data in front of somebody in a way that they understand it, in a way that they can use it and reuse it and share it. That's the benefit.
Yep. And I think if you think about about an anti-money laundering, just a simple example is, you might have a domain around your customers. Remember, know your customer is one of the big parts of anti-money laundering, and it's part of investigations and so on. And so, but we use customers for all kinds of things within the bank. It's the bread and butter of all of our operations. And so you can imagine a domain around customers that's been curated, it's been organized, it's been enabled and made available to end users. Now, if I want to use that customer domain within my anti-money laundering solution or some other use case, it's there, it's consumable. I don't have to create it. I don't have to go through all of the process and the mechanics and the nitty-gritty of building out that domain. It's there. Now I can consume it. Now you've accelerated my path to my use case because I build out additional domains around that are specific to anti-money laundering, but I can leverage existing domains around other common products. So that's where I see a lot of the value.
Hey, Pat, do me a favor. Go back up to the FinServe use case slide.
I'll do my best.
Hey,
look at that.
Hey, that was quick. Look at you. There's only one slide up. Nice job. So I think, if we were to deepen the discussion, so to speak, and I kind of went through some of these fairly quickly. It's just we only have an hour, but there's a lot of depth behind every one of these. Pat, let me ask you, do you recognize these? There's some in here that are pretty interesting, right? And I know some of these are financial digital twin, right? I have, energy digital twins. I've seen supply chain digital twins. I think digital twin is a term that's used broadly across, any digital leader loves the idea of a digital twin. It's saying, hey, I've got a digital version of what's going on in the world. Financial digital twin, I think I've heard a couple different ways to think about that. What I'm familiar with and what I represented here on the slide was the idea of creating a digital model for a customer, right? And so for a specific customer, we're able to create a digital model to understand their buying habits, or we're able to understand their lending habit or their borrowing habits, or able to understand their investment habits. Or you can do that for a bank, or you can do that for a set of customers, or you can do that for an organization. And if you can do that, then you're able to apply analytics across the top to start to figure out where you may optimize, where you may sell better, where you may pull back, so to speak, where you may predict what's going to happen next. Those are kind of future thinking, right? When you think about customer 360, I've also had somebody talk about kind of the analytics at the edge. It's about creating a profile for a customer, right? So internally for an AML team, you might create a customer 360 mile to create risk profiles, to understand what type of risk a specific customer might pose to the organization, and use that as a variable in your investigations. For somebody at a bank who's actually working with or trying to enable customers, I know, I have my bank app on the phone, so to speak, and I love whenever I get an alert that there may be a purchase that was fraudulent, or whenever I'm somewhere and I get an alert that, hey, you can use your card here for a discount, or hey, and different types of device, so to speak. That's another kind of position for customer 360. I give those examples, Pat, because I think on the business side, there are business leaders, digital leaders, in financial services that are talking about pushing these forward. Sometimes from an architecture perspective or an IT perspective, we're in the back office solving all the technology stuff. But to your question a second, Rebecca, about the difference between fabric and mesh, mesh is designed for these problems. Mesh is designed for the consumer, right? So when we think about data mesh, this is the way we should be thinking about it. How can I use data mesh characteristics, bringing all the data, organizing it, making it easily available? How can I bring those characteristics to bear on these financial services use cases? That's, I think, the big difference. That's what we should be talking about. Don't get me wrong, the love and the benefits on the architecture side are fantastic, but I think the love and the benefits on the business side are even more fantastic. Am I hyping it too much, Pat? Maybe I am.
No, no, I think you're right on the money. I think you're right on the money. This is where the conversation needs to be for the vast majority of our consumers. This is what they care about. So I think you're right on.
Awesome.
Cool. It looks like we have one last question. Who are the main consumers?
I think you've got, maybe I'll take a stab and then see if Pat agrees or corrects me. I think you've got, first and foremost, every consumer is different, right? And so when you design a data mesh, you shouldn't go set out and say, hey, I'm going to design for this consumer. No, no, no. I think when you design a mesh and you start that initial domain, you bring that consumer in the room and you have to understand that consumer. And when you get ready to build the second domain, you bring that consumer in the room and you understand that consumer. And so first, it's the appreciation that every one of those consumer teams is different. Now, you have IT consumers, and those are great because they already know how to use the tools, because they already understand how to grab data, so to speak, and use data. But you also have business consumers, and those are also pretty great, right? Those are, I would say, that's the goal for data mesh. I know a lot of my colleagues will disagree with me, but in my view of data mesh, it's about enabling that business consumer, right? It's getting them to do more with their data. Are they going to write data schemas or build data models? No. But in data mesh, you don't have to, right? In Starburst, you don't have to. We make it easy, out of all the tools that are out there. I think if I'm a business consumer, I can do more in Starburst because I'm able to, I could write my own data product, right? I can learn to write a query. I can create a data product, right? So it's really, really easy. And so I think you've got IT consumers. I think you've got business consumers. I think you've got internal consumers. I think if you sell data products, you've got external consumers. But I think every one of those groups is differently. And principle number one is making sure you understand the consumer you're serving. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree totally. And I think like the business consumer in my mind anyway is always the goal. It's the target. And if you can address, if you can service the business user, then you're bringing IT along with them, because the IT folks are savvy about data engineering, and so they have the wherewithal to do a little bit of the digging, and they can figure out what's inside a table because they know how to write their own SQL and they know how to do things because that's their day job, and so they have the ability, they have a unique ability to be able to discover information. It's harder for the business user. So the business user has always been very dependent on that whole pipeline. Here's what I need to answer. I don't know where the data is and I don't know what to do to it. In order to get it to where I need it to be, can you go do it for me? And there's that time lag, that it takes time for the data engineers and IT to satisfy that request. If working through IT, we build a really strong, and working with the business consumers as clients, we build a really strong data mesh and built on a data fabric, then those end users are more empowered and more enabled. They can actually start looking at the data within the context of their day job, and they become more enabled, less dependent. IT can focus on lots of things. They don't have to continuously satisfy the needs of every single business user.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Great. Well, that looks like it wraps up today's session. Thank you both so much for your time, and thank you all who attended the session. I know I learned a lot today. So thank you all. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you.